Welcome everyone to the second webinar of the HydroCommunication webinar series. This webinar series was launched by the International Association of Hydrological Sciences IHS Helping Working Group on Science Communication Outreach and Promoting the Digital Water Globe. Our goal is to better understand the challenges and opportunities in science communication. More specifically, we want to address how we can translate complex hydrological science into knowledge that informs action. I'm Barbara Széles, helping to organize and moderate this webinar along with Nia Lachman, Christine Oriesnich, and Shoham Allah. Our today webinar session is on the topic Promoting Interdisciplinary Education. And we have two outstanding speakers today whom I want to warmly welcome. Dr. Gemma Carr, Senior Researcher at the Department for Landscape Planning at the Bocconi University in Vienna, Austria, and Professor Mario Mendiondo, Associate Professor at the Center for Water Resources and Environmental Studies, São Carlos School of Engineering, University of São Paulo in Brazil. Our first speaker today will be Dr. Gemma Carr. Her interdisciplinary research focuses on human water-land management interactions, and she has over 15 years of experience in coordinating interdisciplinary research and education programs. Her speech today will focus on interdisciplinary doctoral education, research and education outcomes from the Vienna doctoral program on water resource systems at the TU Wien in Austria. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker today, Gemma. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being here. It's really great to talk about this. Like I say, I'm in Vienna. I'm sitting at the Bocconi. And my background, I identify as an integrated water resource researcher. And I'm going to talk today about my experiences in coordinating interdisciplinary research. And like Boris said, specifically on interdisciplinary doctoral education. So I'll get started. Why interdisciplinary education? Well, I like this cartoon a lot. I'm on the verge of a major breakthrough, but I'm also at the point where chemistry leaves off and physics begins. So I'll have to drop the whole thing. Reality is not like that. These real-world problems cut across the research that we do, these unanswered questions, they require information from and understanding from many different areas, yeah? And also something that we don't think so much about is that we need to generate new questions by bringing together the different disciplines to address the new and existing emerging challenges. As water people, we fully understand the connections between the societal relevance of what we're doing, the health, the natural resource, the pollution, and the fact that these cut across the disciplinary boundaries. So we're fully aware that this needs to, we need to bring in information, understand the systems, the interconnections, and we need people with the skills to do that. And so what do? Well, for example, I was involved since 2009 in the Vienna doctoral program on water resource systems at Technical University Vienna. So this is a doctoral program where to date there's 70 research students, 10 faculty, and so far 51 graduates, and a huge amount of outputs. It's a technical university, so it's bringing together natural science research fields for microbiology, hydrology, remote sensing, resource management, also economics, and more recently, socio-hydrology. And I was coordinating that since 2009. So I had the opportunity to really be from inside looking at how these interdisciplinary relationships, how it's really evolving. More recently, I've been involved in the Environment and Climate Research Hub at University of Vienna. I was coordinating that for a year. This is a more new endeavor. This was started in 2022, and this is 80 researchers from postdocs through to senior, tenured, and close to retirement professors. And it's a hub to bring together across the university researchers from social and natural sciences and to look for collaboration opportunities and develop strength there. So how is interdisciplinary education evolving? So within the Vienna doctoral program and others, this is about integration. It's about finding ways to bring people together, to work together. So with the doctoral program, we were thinking about this in terms of 3 levels of integration. At the first level, you have shared offices, a shared study program, which everybody takes. People from different disciplines take the same courses, a seminar series. You're bringing people together in these settings. Then you have a bit more intense, like annual 6-month symposia where you bring people together. You have research cluster meetings, you have joint supervision. And then the third level is about really the joint study sites. Like we have this hydrological open air laboratory when people go out and set up experiments together. The Danube porous aquifer. So there's really ways to bring the integration together. So then back in 2016, I started thinking, okay, what sort of stuff are we achieving with this program? Okay. And we identified 3 questions, this from the paper, and I've updated this result, the data from up to date now. So I'll show you these results. Question 1, does cross-disciplinary research lead to more innovative scientific findings than monodisciplinary research? Do cross-disciplinary researchers develop professional skills that benefit their careers? And does cross-disciplinary research produce findings of greater societal relevance than monodisciplinary research? And we can look at the publications, the careers, and the media interest and policy impacts of some of the results that come out of the doctoral program. I'll show you what we found. So there are 361 ISI papers from the doctoral program we've authored, and 36% of these would be classified as cross-disciplinary. This means that the authors come from 2 or more distinct research fields. So microbiology and hydrology, for example. When we look at the 221 papers where the first author is a member of the program, so a student or faculty member, 47% of them are cross-disciplinary. And we can compare that a bit to, say, 135 papers where the first author is outside of the program, and so it's a student who's collaborated with somebody else. And there's an average of, just have to move the screen because I can't see it so good, 21% cross-disciplinary. And when we look at the figure here, back in 2016, we can see a really nice trend going up, yeah? It didn't quite work out that way after that. It sort of bounced around a bit, but we're still, on that sort of 47%, yeah? Are these findings innovative? So we can look at the impact factors of the journals where these first author papers are published. And what we can see here is that when we look at the cross-disciplinary work, they're getting an impact factor, they just did this recently, so this is for 2024-25, 8.37, compare with an impact factor of the journals where the monodisciplinary work is of 5.91. So we start to see some sort of, there's some good things going there. Professional skills. From these 51 graduates, 20 did a monodisciplinary PhD based on their publications. They stayed narrow and focused in their discipline, in their research fields. 14 still work monodisciplinary, and 3 have moved into a more cross-disciplinary way. They work, say, in risk consultancy. From the 32 who did their PhD in a cross-disciplinary way, 3 are now moved to monodisciplinary, for example, microbiology or hydrological computation, but 28 continue to work cross-disciplinary. And this includes people who then changed into, say, pharmaceuticals, they move more to policy or general data analysis. And then with societal value. So the work that's going on in the doctoral program relates to many things, but you can pull out a few key themes: the drought, the flooding, water quality, and resource management. What's interesting here is a bit of a mixed bag. What we see is that the monodisciplinary work, the drought and flooding, is mainly concentrated on monodisciplinary, like one field. But the water quality stuff, resource management, is more cross-disciplinary. It's bringing together different fields, the microbiology together with groundwater hydrology, things like that. So we can see some trends there too. So in summary, in this area, okay, we see that we can do more cross-disciplinary work. We could almost maybe generate 26% more interdisciplinary work with a program. It seems to be more innovative based on this analysis so far. And people who do cross-disciplinary work continue to work that way following graduation. Societal interest topics are addressed both ways. But I didn't talk about this, but we do start to see that people will start with their PhD in a narrow way and broaden it out as they go on through their studies, bringing in new fields. And then the question is, why? So what we did next is we started to look at how having a program is driving this interdisciplinary work. Okay, what's happening to do that? And to do that, we came up with this framework. It's a kind of theory of change framework. You have some institutional support, you have some resources, and if you do things right, you get social learning processes. What I mean by this is sort of individual learning, interdisciplinary practice, research practice, which is kind of a culture, a way of doing things, and interaction between people. You do that well, and you get social capital outcomes. This is an ability to interact. This is the connectivity between the people and a shared understanding. And if you do that well, then you get then you do get the research, the new skills, the new human capital, the new capacities. What I've added in recently is these intrinsic personal factors, because that sort of came out to me with the University of Vienna Research Hub. And I'll talk about that now. Just to explain that in a little bit more detail, with the social learning processes, this is, say, things like individual learning. And I did interviews with students, graduates, and faculty from the doctoral program. Lecturers spoke about teaching with knowledge bridges, connecting to the fields of the other expertises that the other students in the classes do. So they're teaching to an interdisciplinary audience, and they find ways to bridge between their knowledge, that the field that they're teaching, to those from different knowledge groups. Students talked about learning how to learn different fields. And then learning how, why, and what to integrate. And from water resources, we're very familiar with that and teaching that, and building up levels of complexity. From the practices, this is about clear communication and clarification, and this requires a certain, respect for the other person's discipline, recognizing and working with the differences. Also setting defensible boundaries around what you're including and what you're not including, because you've got a reason for that and what that is, and being transparent about it. And the interaction, this is intensive. That's what we found. Students say what really benefits is going out in the field and collecting data together or running experiments together. These social capital outcomes, this is this ability to interact. And students talked about, their self-confidence growing as they learned how to engage with other disciplines. This interpersonal connectivity is shown by these co-authored publications that's coming through, and the connections which people are building, which last them their life, really. And shared understanding. This is a bit more tricky to identify cross-disciplinary research questions. This is a tricky field, but it's something to focus a bit more on, I think, going forward. And then these knowledge types, these are more than just publications. These are the models, the data sets, the new understanding, and the proposals, and hopefully the funding that comes with it, and the students that graduate and their careers. I just want to talk very quickly about this intrinsic motivation, because I think this is also important to consider, that there is this sort of underlying group of people who are, that's driving them forward. And this is what I saw with the Environment and Climate Research Hub. This is a group that people choose to join this, yeah? And when they choose to join, they submit a letter of motivation. So there were 70 letters of motivation. There's 80 researchers in this group. So they looked at these letters of motivation, and I pulled out what were their expectations from the program. And what really came clear is that, the people wanted, collaborations. They were looking at engaging beyond academia, which is another thing about increasing international collaborations. It's very outward looking, and it's very much driven. The people are very driven on sort of learning new things. So I think that's an important thing to consider too. And finally, institutional structures, also something I want to touch on as well. Disciplines exist to make complexity manageable. Faculties and departments are really fundamental university structures. They're very stable. They control hiring and promotions, grant allocation, and teaching. And what I sort of learned a little more about is that, new cross-disciplinary structures need to complement and build on this. You build capacity, taking care not to be seen to be poaching resources. And I think part of this is really demonstrating the benefits of interdisciplinary, which I hope I've tried to show today, like really going into these data on what are we producing, and how are we, what's the value, the added value of doing this? What knowledge are we generating that we didn't know before? What skills, what capacities have we got that we didn't have before? and coming into this discussion of, like tribalism versus inclusivity and diversity, bringing that to balance, this outward lookingness can really generate innovation, and it's very important. And then, there's different scales to this as well. When we think about, people like their belonging, they like to belong, but there's many ways to find them or build your tribe. And I think, thinking on the global scale, there's many emerging fields. These are very dynamic. And so there's lots of opportunity to work, to think across disciplinary. So just in summary, two key things that come out: interdisciplinary education. This learning aspect, scaffolding students to learn new material, learning how to handle more complexity, learning the interactions, and this questions and clarifications is important. And then this practicing, places for practice, these are practicing these intensive interactions, practicing collaboration, practicing the shared research questions. Methods, I haven't spoken about this, but testing out, developing new methods which can bring together different data and work and generate new information. Summary, yeah, I think data suggests it's definitely worth the effort. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, and I'm sure if there's any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Gemma. This was a super interesting presentation and also very, very interesting results and numbers and statistics from the Vienna doctoral program. Thank you so much for the talk. Before I open the floor for other questions from the audience, we have with our working group one general question for you. So if you want to summarize for our working group, what are the challenges in communicating hydrological science, and more importantly, how and in which ways could interdisciplinary education help to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think what became clear when I was interviewing students and graduates as well is this, I've said it a few times, this sort of need for questioning assumptions, for questioning your people's positions, and taking that as somebody who's explaining something and not taking offense to it, taking the time. So it's a two-way process, yeah? Taking the time to explain what it is, why you hold that position, and at the same time, and listening to why there's some doubt there or why it's not so clear, and trying, is the listening is almost as important as the talking, I think, as we often say. So I think that then the education part of it is giving people the opportunities to do that is really critical, so something like the doctoral program, and you were there, Bori, you can add some comments too. So giving people the opportunity to sit in rooms with others who are talking from a completely different standpoint about something that you might not know, and say, okay, but I might not understand everything you're saying, so can you explain that to me? And then, okay, I'm going to need to take a bit more time to go into that. And then also making some judgment on how much is important at that point, because there's a huge amount of information, and that's what I mean about sort of these boundaries as well. And that's it's a supportive process. You need the right people around you to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the answering to the question. I'm checking the chat if someone has some. Soham posted one question in the chat. So what an impressive program and such detailed insights. Thank you for the presentation. His question is, most projects aren't as mature in cross-disciplinarity. Is there a set of best practices or a primer that could help the uninitiated to unlock the magic, both in terms of the members of the groups and the coordinators, knowledge brokers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is why I spoke about these sort of intrinsic factors. I mean, you can't force people, right? People have to come because they want to. These are they're open-minded, and they want to. They see opportunities. I think that's also important. People have got an inquisitive mind to say, okay, I want to see where I can go with that, or they've already had some experiences which have said, okay, I want some more information from somewhere else. In terms of best practices, I mean, I think this is what we tried to do with this kind of conceptualization, to say it is a bit generic in many ways, but this context and inputs, I mean, this is really, money, we need this institutional support which I spoke about. This is really critical as well. What we find is if you need to pay attention like to this interaction, this area. Like, I think this is what I said with the individual learning, the research practices, this culture of how you're doing things. And then these opportunities, and it doesn't stop. You've always got to keep going with it. Regularly, people need to meet regularly to be, to get something from those meetings as well. So I think this does just try to come up with those sort of best practices, which I think many programs can take. But obviously, the underlying challenge is, from a university perspective, this need for, willingness, buy-in to the concepts of it. And of course, ideally, specifically funded positions to do interdisciplinary. But I also think there's quite a bit that can be done by just by pure motivation, pure motivation to reach out to those around you.
Thank you very much.
There is one interesting question also another interesting question from the chat. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. How can researchers balance developing deep expertise in their own discipline while also acquiring enough knowledge from other fields to contribute effectively to interdisciplinary projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, obviously, the societal relevant part of it, the bit, the monodisciplinary, the interdisciplinary, it's not like one is better than the other. I think it comes down to the problem that's being addressed and the perspective that you're taking to addressing that problem. And then it's coming down to the people, the fields that you're working intensively with, what's needed to address that question. So in a way, I don't think that they're against one another. Definitely not. It's not one or the other. I think in some cases you'll have a question or a problem or a focus that would definitely benefit from bringing in other perspectives. I think also what's important to touch on as well is how much of an expert do you need to be in the other discipline in order to sort of do that, and I think that's where this collaboration part comes in. There's a lot of trust involved as well. If you have an expert from a different research field, I was working recently with someone from maths. I'm not a mathematician. I can't understand. So there's a lot of trust involved in that, saying what's necessary from that perspective, and what can I bring then to that from my perspective, and meeting in the middle. And part of that as well is sometimes negotiation. What's your position or what? You're going to come to a constructive outcome, but it might take a while to get there. So I would never put them against each other. I think this team collaboration work is really the sort of the key to doing that. But yeah, you need to be willing to engage deeply in the other fields that you're in, even though you recognise that other people hold much more expertise that you're going to call on. I hope that sort of comes close to answering that question.
Thank you very much. Maybe we have question for one more, for time for one more question. I see from the chat, Everton is asking that the transdisciplinary is great to bring new questions for established knowledge. How to overcome the fact that the research tend to be shallow in the disciplines that do not communicate well and not deep enough for a researcher that wants to stay in research?
So I think I think this goes in the direction of how do you carve out a career as an interdisciplinary researcher in an academic setting? This could be maybe where this question goes, I think. Mm-hmm. I see this as a spectacularly difficult challenge. Due to the fact, disciplines are what's structuring the education academic system. And they're there for, like I say, they're there for a good reason. It does simplify the complexity. I think it's about recognizing formally recognizing the way that overlapping is equally as overlapping collaborative work that goes into, and I'm not saying watering down anything, when you're combining fields, from economics with hydrology, you're going to do best in both of them. No journal is going to accept or a good journal is not going to accept weak economics in a hydrology and vice versa, okay? So you're going to do the best in both of them. So you need the right people around you. In terms of career-wise, I think this is a challenge. So I think when you're working across disciplines, you're always, which department is gonna take you on. You're floating between many places. And I think this is where, universities are starting to talk about interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary positions that deliberately try and catch people who can do those things. I think there's still a way to go though. I think this is really tricky.
Thank you very much. Due to time, I think we have to we have to move on to our next presenter, Professor Mario Mendiondo, Associate Professor at the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. He participates in interdisciplinary research for regenerative design and innovation. His speech today will explore how to bridge science, policy, and practice through a transformative education. So I would like to invite our second speaker today. Professor, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Urbala. So are you hearing me okay? And my slides are being projected okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Christina, Neha, Burbala, Sohan, the IHS Helping Working Group on Science, Communication, Outreach, and Promotion, the Digital Water Globe. These seminars and this kind of discourse strengthening diverse voices for water. And also, it's a pleasure to share this moment with Dr. Gemma Carr. I admire her and also her groups, also in Boku. It's a pleasure, Gemma. And also, my presentation is coming from the starting point from Gemma, is bridging science, policy, and practice through a transformative education, and also with co-creation of knowledge, but in a multicultural society under transition. So time is important, co-evolutionary aspects are very important. So especially in this part of the globe. So I am in Brazil, University of São Paulo, São Carlos School of Engineering. Some question promoting transformative education is how can we transform science to policy and policy to action? So what kind of collaborative works? So, and some starting questions, how can we translate complex hydrology informs action? And also, what if we understood water through a multicultural and interdisciplinary perspective, not only Western, but non-Western, to better understand the challenges and opportunities in communicating for meaningful challenge, how can we engage for? And so these kind of aspects, I can introduce myself, putting this first formal. So I coming from the University of São Paulo, coming from the São Carlos School of Engineering. So we have the numbers. We are very proud for that in terms of inclusiveness, equity, diversity, but also because I'm teaching in undergraduate courses and also in graduate courses. So our full dedication is for research, teaching, innovation, extension, and inclusion. That is the 5 aspects of our research in all aspects in our. But also I can be introduced myself coming from non-Western approach. So here we see, for instance, a Celino Huniquin, Capegue Pukeni, that means bridge alligator. That is a Mako Visions. It's a very nice book. I recommended you. This also written in English and in Portuguese. And you see how can people say all the river basins, the water cycle related to some cosmological aspects. And also the 9-year-old girl, vision of water. You see in the upper right part, this polycentric governance aspect that a child can introduce. So that is very important. For instance, I can also be introduced through the meanders. You see the meanders, so this is my region. coming from thousands of meanders and oxbows. And this kind of people, when you meet them, they introduce themselves, the Indian, as coming from the meanders or 1,000 meanders, rivers, and so on. So this is the kind of trying to put in my presentation. Also, if we are trying more to the Andean people, Inca people, you see the Andean cross here, and you see all the dynamic, because it is very uncommon from the Western people to understand the cosmological aspect. You see there is not static. You see it is moving and turning. I'm making co-evolutionary aspects. And also all our discussion in this webinar are in some way introduced in these cosmological aspects of this non-Western education of these people. So that is an alternative approach. And we introducing this as a co-alignment of legacies. We see these panarchy aspects, or this spiral aspect of Indian people, or even you see here, this is my grandmother's carpet made from used sockets. This is trying to recycle resources and make it more circular economy. And also in the bottom right, you see this WMO early warnings for all. That is concentric, related to people-centered aspect. So we are moving into more circular aspect. And when we are introducing this aspect into education for action, we can see here this aspect of emerging concept of living labs. We see here in some part some archetypes of how can we introduce new proactive Panther Ray inspired archetypes for working in vulnerable communities, for instance, in Amazon regions or in specific regions of Brazil or Latin America. And of course, time matters. You see here 200 years. That is from IPCC last report. You see, of course, one part is history and the other are scenarios. And how come, in our case, for our graduate program, starting in the 70s, has the urgent need to be adapted into a new equilibrium aspect of how can we deliver education, water education, in a more transitional aspect. So some of our important reference, of course, you know most of them, very recent, collaborative community, but going into the direction of living labs as a demonstrative pilot projects. Also coming from time, you see here some time lapse of between 1922, the creation of the International Association of Hydrological Science, also the construction of the dam, at the same time, the creation of our University of São Paulo. In the 50s, the foundation of our school. In the 60s, the International Hydrological Decade, now is from UNESCO, IHP. In the 70s, the creation of our graduate program. There's a hydraulics and sanitary engineering program. And also in the 70s, the creation of the Center for Water Resources and Environmental Studies, the CREA. And last but not least, the starting point of the first scientific decade, the predictions in engagement basins, the PAP, that after that, this is the Panther Ray and also the helping. So this is important to see all time, because when we introduce the co-alignment, as I mentioned, from one side, the UNESCO HP phases, you see in the left part, also how our program has the emergency need to be adapted to the times. And also in the bottom right, you see the IHS scientific decades. Also the Digital Water Club as part of some supporting of the helping decade, hydrology engaging local people in one global world. That is solutions. And coming from to solutions and to actions, we need to transform or going to integrate, as Gemma mentioned before, blending disciplines. You see, not to go into silos, but integrating them. So you see here three National Institute of Science and Technology in the upper part for climate change. In the left part is for water security and adaptive management. And in the right part, you see the National Institute of Science and Technology of fighting hunger or food security. And in all these combinations, you have different frameworks of new emerging aspect of projects. So all of these logos are granted projects from the CNPq, FAPESP, CAPES, FINEPS, Brazilian or Latin American agencies in cooperation with other overseas agencies. And other aspects is about risk, and in the special aspect of sustainable observatories for planetary health as a kind of living labs that make this transition from science to policy to action. Some examples here you see in the upper left, Günther Bloch, at Technical University of Vienna in 2019, first time he visited Brazil, also being invited by our program for an advanced school of society and water under change. And also in the bottom part, you see now the editorial board of the Digital Water Club introducing equity, diversity, and inclusiveness principle in IHS. People coming from Latin America, from India, from China, from Europe, Africa, and North America. And in the upper right part, you see how this exchange with different cultures, with different scholars, outstanding scholars visiting us, accelerated the exchanging of students coming or visiting or making in all continents in our graduate program. That is a real example in the last 10 years. More about the science to policy and action is introducing transformative education coming from advanced schools, like in right upper part, for instance, or the National Institute of Science and Technology of Climate Change. Also, we are very, very thankful to Professor Nancy Doubleday, McMaster University, Canada, in a research mission with students in a field trip with us as part of the first human water feedback course we delivered 2 years ago here, and also introducing non-Western aspects of ancestral waters, as you see. Also here is the National Institute of Science and Technology on water security and adaptive management. You see time is important, and the different outcomes, especially attending the people, the citizen, the communities, especially different leaders from different levels of governance related to this polycentric governance in our case. More education in action, you see Heidi Kreibich this year, also in part of some training courses of the seminar of human, water, and society feedbacks, solutions from helping, and also introducing new emerging master and PhD students and assistant professors from different universities, not only the University of Sao Paulo, visiting the lake, visiting the facility, and also going into the wild. You see there in experimental catchment. That's also Professor Edson Wendland, also the UNESCO chairholder, Professor Jamil Anash, and Professor Marcos Benzo. Also here, that was in May this year, that is Saket Pande. I saw Saket Pande, he's attending the seminar. Hi, Saket. Also introducing emerging nexuses through transforming socio-hydrological aspects or archetype into, for instance, why not introducing of making the transition between models, archetypes into games. So this is one example with the students also holding some ideas of transforming the previous archetypes into games. And also people, normal people. You see in the upper left part, there are people from the civil defense, also water practitioners. In that picture, you see maybe 3 or 4 people only coming from higher education. So we have learned from these people and making a co-creation of knowledge in terms of, for instance, flood mapping downstream our Korea facility, of course, by regulatory aspects. And also you see in the bottom part, also make the training to normal undergraduate students in an experimental station, and also making this discussion with other people. You see the International Center of Excellence in Dams in Roorkee in India last year, or in Wuhan University and in the Yangtze River Scientific Institute in China. So making this discussion, expanding it into more, sensible aspects of actions. And now, last but not least, how can we introduce or accelerate this into living labs? So climate-adapted living labs are one of our big bet in terms of this transformation from science to policy to action. So co-creation, real-world testing, policy integration with some reference, of course, ancestral futures coming from non-Western aspects. Here, some pictures you see of this facility that is no fake pictures, that's real pictures, no artificial intelligence here. So you see undergraduate students introducing in more livable and more practical aspects of water resources and socio-hydrological aspects and challenges. And introducing this panarchy, these kind of living labs with a training course from people from Latin America, from Africa especially. We are receiving so many people. And in the center bottom part, you see Tom Bogart. Hi, Tom Bogart, also holding this model of a river basin, making through a 3D van drone that you can introduce this into a digital twin or even in a classroom. So that is the aspect of coevolutionary education that should be transformative and delivered into actions. That is the last, maybe the last picture, also with some discussion. Also, Heidi Kreibich participated in this year, and also part of the training with undergraduate and graduate students. So, two invitations. You see, we are preparing for a new El Nino, maybe the super El Nino from the next months. So it's an open invitation to visit Brazil. We are organizing our Urban Waters Symposium in São Carlos, where am I now? And also you are very, very welcome. And in the right part, you see another. This is Hydrology for All, co-creating equitable water solutions. You have still time to submit abstracts. This is in Casablanca, Morocco, in November this year. So that is my slide. Thank you for your attention. I am very open to the questions and the follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this really, really excellent, exciting talk, really inspiring talks and slides. Before I open the floor for questions, I have the usual question which we ask each of our speakers. So if you want to summarize for our working group, what are the challenges in communicating hydrological science, and how do you see how could interdisciplinary education help to overcome these challenges?
Yeah. Well, the point is, once upon a time, one assistant asking me a question. This was not from higher education. It was a normal, vulnerable woman. And I responded, so I think this kind of question that you mentioned now is, the answer is putting more Marius Mendiondo, Gemma Carr, Borbal Aceles in the vulnerable areas close to this community or vulnerable communities in field, and more vulnerable people visiting the universities. So we need to exchange more. So and one example is that usually we have models, but we need to have the practice to confront the models with reality, and especially when we have unequal worlds or unequal regions. If you compare, for instance, Haridwar in March every year, when you have the pilgrims, millions of pilgrims with high poverty, and we compare this situation with Sao Paulo, megacity, or even with Vienna, you have different conditions or drivers, different conditions, but the drivers are the same, because all of us, we need to adapt to the unprecedented extremes like high droughts, higher droughts, or higher floods. And that's the point. So the drivers are the same, but the tools are different and should be adapted to every locality or region. So helping is special because in hydrology, engaging local people in a global world. Global world means global drivers.
Thank you very
Okay?
much. Thank you. Yes, yes. Thank you very much for the answer. I'm also checking the chat. I don't see questions here. If anyone wants to speak up from the audience, you can also just unmute yourself and ask some questions. Anyone? Gemma would have a question.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you for the super presentation. Yeah, lovely. I was just going to ask, just typing in, what about citizen science? Have you got experiences with doing citizen science, and what sorts of things have you done with that, and what sort of results have you had? And the second question about what about your graduates? Where are they going? What kind of careers are they moving on to? Thanks.
Thank you, Gemma. Citizen science, that's because I mentioned before, we have full dedication to teaching. So we teach in undergraduate, research, graduate, innovation, that it should be full dedication, extension. So, and inclusiveness, or EDI principle, equity, diversity, and inclusiveness. So these last two fingers mean citizen science in practice. So most of the professors working in extension, some of them, some examples I presented here, of course, integrated to the normal, formal graduate program, they use citizen science through theoretical approach or inductive approach. That means you learn from practice. So this is a loop. So for instance, when you ask every scholar at USP, that means, okay, I think I'm using citizen science. Why? Because I'm working with normal people, and I need to make the communication to them about my theory. If I cannot achieve this point, I have no working with them. So citizen science in that aspect of communicating, but this is in two directions, because citizen science assumptions is changing. That if we have the hypothesis, the null hypothesis, that we know and they don't know, that's it, the zero hypothesis, null hypothesis. Peter Lux is here. Hi, Peter. But the alternative hypothesis is that we know and they know too. So we all together need to learn from each other. And that is the second point, very, very interesting in transformative education. So this null hypothesis, in my experience, when I'm speaking with different scholars around the world, is changing very, very fast, because people like, for instance, Giulio Castelli, I presented on some of the papers that he led on community co-creation of water, co-creating water knowledge from a community aspect. Insight is that we are learning from in the field, from the field. And that is very important because we need to practice more citizen science 2.0 and not citizen science 1.0. That means we know and you know nothing. It's a very soft hypothesis difference, but it's very important. About the second, about the alumni. Well, when I introduced this map with these arrows, that means our students, PhD students, making exchange, making some double diploma, joint diploma, and sometimes, of course, they decide to return back to Brazil, to Latin America, or they prefer to stay in the overseas countries. Of course, that is, sometimes people say, okay, we have in some time soft brain drain, but it's not really exact because we maintain the network, and maintaining the network means the science is still working together. So we have some returning PhD students working here, becoming professor, or some of them staying in Germany, in Europe, or in the United States, for instance, or North America. So the discussion is the excellence that we are producing in our graduate students is being recognized by the papers, the awards, the prize, and this is I didn't present that, but we are very proud of that. So it's very active, very, very active. And I think in the maybe 5 or 10 years, this momentum will be maintained. Why? Not because I am Mario Mendiondo. No, I'm not working alone. There are a group of several people, not only in our graduate program, but in different graduate programs with different networks. So the networks are very, very high with all continents. And in my opinion, this arrow is going to increase much better than today in a positive direction, of course. So I'm very optimistic about that.
Thank you very much for the reply. We have maybe time for the last question from the chat from Everton. Hi, Mario, you have participated in our wide interdisciplinary event on water regeneration last week. How these practical experiences could be improved with a closer relation with universities.
Yeah, Everton, thank you for attending. This was amazing. Everton Oliveira from Hydroplan, Brazil, organizing a very, very nice international meeting in the last days about regenerative water cycle. That means, and I'm part of this statement because in one of the living labs I presented in some of the slides, the regenerative aspect is explicit. So if we have no regenerative water cycle approach, reusing, recovering, rethinking, we cannot achieve this transition from science to policy, policy to action. Action means people in the field, communities, and regenerative water cycle, and all the linked cycles to this aspect is crucial. If we have no regenerative aspect, we have no living labs. So that is the next step. And the Climares International Hub, that is a long-term project. See if we are making all the things accountable for our funding agencies. It achieves the year 2036. That means 10 years in the future. I remember Sorosian, for instance, in National Science Foundation in the Sahara, for instance, in Tucson, when created the 10 years long-term funding. So we need that, but we are going into the regenerative aspects of living labs with people. Thank you, Everton.
Thank you very much for the questions and also for the answers. And with this, I would like to really thank to both speakers for the really outstanding, inspiring, and excellent talks today. And also many thanks to the audience for joining and for the excellent questions. And with Nea, we will be in touch again with similar interesting webinars in the next months. You are all very welcome to join, to attend. With this, I would like to thank you everyone for joining today, and I wish you a nice rest of the day.